Hi, Harold.
Hi, Bernie.
Hello, Norm.
Hello.
So Ernie advertised, try to encourage other people to join. Let's see how many, whether we have a large group tonight.
Let's hope so. Share the wealth.
Yeah.
Where are we holding?
We're up to page 47, interruptions during a meal, I think. That's where we
Good.
are.
Okay. So I'm in the right spot. When's Walter coming back?
I think he's coming back on Thursday. He did get an earlier flight.
And SD?
Yesterday. Ernie, is all well with your children in Israel?
Thank God. They're shaken up, but they're hanging in there. Are we on 45, 46, or did I make it to 57?
47.
47. Okay, that's where I thought. We did the Rav Moshe.
No, maybe you should do it.
We'll do Rav Moshe again on the bottom of 46. Because that comes up quite frequently. The issue if you're eating a meal and you have to daven. What do you do about benching and all of that? So we'll see what Rav Moshe says about that. 46 on the bottom.
What is this? Same book? It's 14. There's another book.
Harold, what do you have? Is page 45 interruptions during meal or is
No,
47?
47 is interruptions.
Okay.
You have the wrong
Okay,
book.
so go get another.
You actually have the wrong book.
Okay, so don't go get another.
Yeah,
This-
no,
this
he
is-
threw that
this
book
is-
away.
That's a problem one.
That's the problem book?
Yeah.
So more than one.
Bernie, is Walter back home yet?
I believe he's coming on Thursday morning.
They're coming Thursday. America's talking about sending planes, military planes, because there's thousands of Americans trying to get out. There's not enough flights.
Right.
So they're talking. Germany is sending. I'm saying. Germany and France, I think, are sending planes. to get this because their citizens who were there can't leave. The learning we're going to do is people, of course, are davening and saying Tillim, but learning Torah is also something that we can do. We're not on the front lines, but we should have in mind that the learning should help defend all the soldiers that are on the front lines. Another question pertaining to reciting brachot during a meal is whether one who interrupts his meal for another activity, even without leaving, right? We've been dealing with shinu makom, with leaving the premises and coming back. And what do you have to do? You have to bench, you have to make another bracha. Let's say you have to daven. Is that an interruption? When you come back to the meal, you have to make another bracha on bread. Some Rishonim attempt to resolve this question from the following Gemara. The Gemara states that if someone says, give me a cup of wine with which to recite Birkas Hamazon, so he's done with his meal. He's considered to have taken his mind off the meal. So at that point, if he said, go bring me the kosher bracha, if he changes his mind and he wants to eat more, they have to recite another bracha. The reason is that it's impossible to recite the bracha and to drink at the same time. The Gemara contrasts this with a particular halacha of kisui adam, which is a mitzvah that you have to cover the blood of a bird or a chaya after you shecht it, pertaining to how many brachas are recited when slaughtering multiple times. Hachi amar Rav, kiven da amar havli livrei. Rav said, once you say, bring me the cup so we can bench, itzri lemishtei chamra. He can't drink anymore. Achanami. Kiven to itfel leksui. Now he has to cover the blood after the shechita. Chayv lebracha. He has to make a bracha. So the Gemara says, Achiyash, there's no comparison. You can't drink and make a bracha right at the same time. So once you request a cup to bench, that's a clear that your intent is you want to stop drinking. But when you're covering the blood of a bird, you can do the shechita with one hand and cover the blood with the other hand. It's not necessarily so that you can't do both at the same time. So the act of covering the blood of an undomesticated animal is not considered a hefsek in the act of shechita, since you could have done that at the same time. According to the Gemara, the reason that one must recite a new bracha rishona after requesting a cup to recite Birchas Hamazon is that one cannot eat at the same time as reciting Birchas Hamazon. Therefore, the declaration to recite Birchas Hamazon demonstrates that one is about to engage in a hefsek, an interruption, which concludes the meal. The Tur cites Rabbi Yontiv, who suggests that likewise, reciting one of the daily tefillah, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, in the middle of a meal at home is a hefsek, because you can't eat while you're davening. This is the tour in Orach Chaim 178. Middle of your meal, you see that Zman Mincha is about to pass. You have to daven Mincha. So if you stand up and daven Mincha, he has to wash his hands again. He can't daven and eat at the same time. Tosfos rejects this. In Psachim, they write that a person who prays in the middle of a meal, it's not considered a hefsek. You don't have to recite a motzi, since the tefillah didn't necessarily constitute the end of the meal. Mikan mashma, says Tosfos there, shemshochach lispala. You're in the middle of the meal. You forgot that you didn't daven mincha. V'nizkar b'emtza suda v'yispala. She'ein tzorich bracha afilu chad tefillah. You don't have to make another bracha. Umar shehevia Rav Yontif, Rayami, Kisui Adam, Domer Mishtu Bruchi Bad Yadol Le'efshar, Shetzorich Levarch Birchas Hamazon Little Yodav, Ein a Ray, he says it's not approved. The Davki Gabi Birchas Hamazon Amir Haki, Avi Hefsek B'Gmar Suda. Once you decide to bench, that's clearly a Hefsek. Aval Tfila, Afagav de Mechel Utzlui Bad Yadol Le'efshar, yeah, you can't eat and daven at the same time, but just the act of davening doesn't necessarily mean in your mind you're concluding the Suda. So Tosfos thinks you can go back and eat without a new bracha. Rav Moshe Feinstein raises the following question against Tosfos. Tefillah requires concentration. And one who is praying should certainly not be thinking about his meal. Why then is tefillah not a hefsek? Rav Moshe explains that a hefsek in this context is determined by one's intent for whether he plans to continue eating later or not. It might be a thing that he has to concentrate on, but If he's not having a conscious thought to conclude his meal, Rav Moshe is going to say that you can go back and eat. Masha Tomer Nechti Yakar, his grandson, was wondering, why isn't davening a hasachadas, a lack of, changing your concentration? During tefillah, you have to remove other thoughts from your mind. It's all based on context. Hesach hadas during a meal means you don't want to eat anymore. He's still hungry, he hasn't finished everything that he's eating. But once he puts in his mind that he wants to stop, that's considered that he ended his meal. He's not going to eat for a little bit. During davening, you do have to stop eating completely. During tefillah, you can't think about eating. If he has in mind to go back to his meal, he doesn't have to make a new bracha. Even he was going to go into the kitchen and do something, but he's going to come back and eat. So tefillah is no different. Even though he removed all the thoughts from his mind, because he was planning to come back to his meal and eat. Even though during tefillah he had to stop eating, he says it's not going to be a problem. The Shulchan Aruch, in fact, rules with Tosfos that if one needed to pray in the middle of the meal and you're eating bread, such you see that the time for the tefillah is about to pass, you do not have to recite a new bracha rishona when you continue to go back to your meal. Shulchan Aruch rules similarly in a case where you took a short nap in the middle of the meal. You can't have a greater hesach hadas than that.
Hold on.
Yaakov, we're on 49.
Thank you.
The person didn't daven mincha, and he sees that the zman mincha is about to pass, and he gets up in the middle of the meal, v'omad v'yispalel, afilu mein shos ligmar sudaso, ulispayel shechayv lafsik. There's not enough time for him to finish his suda. He has to daven. It's not considered hefsek, and you're allowed to go back to your meal, and you don't have to make a new bracha. It's also not considered a hefsek if you take a little short nap. The Mishnah notes that if one leaves the house and goes to shul to pray, then the halacha is subject to the machlokas between Shulchan Aruch and Ramah that we saw earlier about leaving the house. According to the Ramah, one need not recite another bracha rishona even when leaving the house. Well, according to the Shulchan Aruch, one who leaves in the middle must recite another bracha rishona when he returns. So, according to the Ramah, even if a meal is like you're having a barbecue at your house, and you see that it's late, and you run to shul and daven mincha and come back, and you had made a hamotzi when you'd started the meal, you wouldn't have to make a hamotzi again. Ashkenazim, according to the Ramah. Any questions? Comments? Okay. Let's go to 59. Mayim achronim. After eating a meal with bread, the Torah requires us to recite Birchas Hamazon. We're going to learn about that the next year. Chazal also legislated an additional mitzvah, not just on Shabbos, but anytime we eat bread, according to which one must wash his hands with mayim achronim before reciting Birchas Hamazon. In the present shir, we will focus on mayim achronim, learn about its origins, a number of its halachos, and whether it applies nowadays or not. The source for mayim achronim is in Chulin, Kufei Amid Aleph, which mentions the halach of mayim achronim and contrasts it to mayim rishonim, the standard netilas yadayim we perform before eating bread. The Gemara notes that while washing mayim rishonim is described as a mitzvah, washing mayim achronim is referred to as a chova, an obligation. Amar Rabbi M'Rabanan Rav Yitzchak Barashia. Mayim rishonim mitzvah, achronim choiva. Amar Rav Yehuda Breid Rav Chia. L'neimar mayim achronim choiva. Shemelach zdoimis yesh, mesamis einayim. Melach zdoimis was salt that came from stone. It was very strong, and we had it on our fingers during our meal. If we touch our eyes with it, we might blind ourselves. So it's a chova because it's an obligation, because it's a sakana. We need it for refuah. In fact, according to this Gemara, mayim achronim is a greater obligation than netilas yadayim prior to a meal, due to the presence of melach stomis at the meal. And this can be dangerous. Rashi explains that the concern of melach stomis stems from the fact that one must use salt when eating bread. A person may handle this strong type of salt with his hands, touch his eyes, which might blind him. Therefore, we wash our hands after exposure to this salt. Rashi says there, melach stomis yesh, you always have to have salt on your bread. When you use your hands, you touch your eyes, you can blind it. According to this reason given by Masechta Sulin, it would seem that nowadays, when such salt is no longer commonplace, some have suggested that the melach domis referred to is in fact found in the salt deposits next to the Dead Sea. According to a note in the Koran Talmud, this salt is probably magnesium chloride, which is found in extremely high concentrates in the Dead Sea, which is consistent with the name sodomite salt, as that was the location of Sodom. Magnesium chloride can easily become intermingled with regular salt, which is extracted in great quantities along the shores of the Dead Sea. Since magnesium chloride is poisonous, there is a danger that its introduction into the eye by unwashed hands could lead to an eye infection. Nevertheless, as will be discussed in the continuation of this shir, this does not necessarily mean that washing mayim achronim today should be limited to places where this salt is commonly found or used, as there are also other reasons given for mayim achronim.
Ernie, this is interesting because, at least from my perspective, because perhaps when it comes in contact with the tears, hydrogen chloride or hydrochloric acid, it converts some hydrochloric acid, creating an acidic solution that causes burning of the eyes.
You mean there's a chemical reaction?
It could be.
Tears,
that's where this
where
comes
the
from.
magnesium chloride, some of it becomes hydrogen chloride.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, in the note above, it says, nowadays, when such salt is no longer commonplace, perhaps mayim achronim should no longer be obligatory. And Tosfos actually writes that in Masechta Eruvin. Mayim achronim, achshav lo nogu b'mayim achronim. Tosa says people don't do it. Dein melachs doimis motzu b'nein. We don't have this type of salt. Or inami lifishena regilim litvo b'tzos melach achar achila. There was also a practice to dip fingers in salt after eating. And that, of course, is also not practiced. However, the Gemara Masechta Brachos refers to Mayim Achronim, and it makes no mention of anything related to Melach's Domis. Rather, the Gemara links it to Kedusha. Tana v'his kedashtem, elu Mayim Rishon. V'hisem kedoshim, elu Mayim Achronim. Ki kadosh zeh shemen, and Yeshem Lokechem zu bracha. I guess they used to spread oil on someone's hands. And then I am the Lord Hashem, that's benching. So some Rishonim, based on this Gemara, infer that Mayim Achronim applies today, in contrast to the opinion of Tosfos. The Rosh subscribes to this approach and explains why this Gemara does not contradict the Gemara in Chulin. Tema, says the Rosh, the Mayim Achronim mitzvah mishum kedusha. The Rosh points out that in brachos, the Gemara seems to say that doing Mayim Achronim has to do with holiness. Ubeper kol habasar in Chulin, mashma shein choyvim ne'asakonim mishum melchus doimis, shemisames einayim. Yesh loim mishum kedusha amru shein mitzvah, mishum sakonim melchus doimis hoisifu lasois choyvim. That means it's a mitzvah to use Mayim Achronim for the holiness aspect, and then they added, due to the danger, the fact that it's obligatory. So according to Rosh, washing Mayim Achronim before reciting Birchas Hamazon is an act of cleanliness and holiness. And Chazal imposed additional stringency because of the danger of the sodomite salt. The Rambam takes a different approach to explain that Mayim Achronim is obligatory today, even though Melech Stomis is no longer extant. In his opinion, there are other types of salt today that can be damaging, and therefore you need to clean it up with Mayim Achronim as well. Whenever you eat bread with salt, you need Mayim Achronim afterwards. Shemeyesh bo Melech Stomis, o Melech Shetivo Kim Melech Stomis, or a salt that is like Melech Stomis. And he could, put it on his eyes and blind himself. So the Rambam basically gives a medical reason for any salt. I mean, I don't know why magnesium chloride would release its chloride ion to the hydrogen atom to make hydrogen chloride any more aptly than sodium chloride, unless it bonds differently. You know what I'm saying? If Bernie was saying that tears cause some hydrogen chloride, because these compounds with chloride are ionic compounds. Mm-hmm. Sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, they have magnesium is 2. It's magnesium chloride 2 because magnesium is +2. So you need 2 chloride ions to bind there. Sodium is +1, chloride is -1. But then they separate as ions, and sometimes if there's a hydrogen ion, you make hydrogen chloride. So
I'm just looking it up. I don't find any ocular side effects, but I do find kidney disease from excessive magnesium chloride.
Okay, but the Gemara clearly says that it was a problem with the eyes.
I'm just telling you because you're a urologist.
Right. Well, yeah, you can have excessive magnesium, high magnesium, low magnesium, and that can cause rhythm disturbances and other metabolic abnormalities. And sometimes they replace magnesium IV. They'll give IV magnesium for Bernie. Remember when you gave people TPN, total parenteral nutrition, that means a person's intestines weren't functioning. So you had to give people high calorie, special types of feedings intravenously. So I remember those people could get both hypermagnesiemic and hypomagnesiemic, and you had to monitor for that, and that's not very common. Not something that we see in clinical practice on a daily basis. The Rif, also based on an incident recorded in the Gemara in Yoima, that Mayim Achronim applies in all circumstances, even if you don't have salt. Says the Rif in Chulin, Avafilin loachal melach, even if you didn't eat salt, cover rabban chayva, shum demayim rishonim achilu bas chsar, achilu b'sar chazir. I guess there was due to laxity in doing Mayim Achronim, somebody ate chazir. And because of laxity of Mayim Achronim, hargos anef, somebody got killed. The Gemara relates a story how an innkeeper fed kosher food only to those he saw performing the Tzilas Yadayim prior to eating bread. And one Jew who failed to do so was fed pork instead. The Gemara relates a rather complex incident in which, because a person had not washed away the residue of his last meal with Mayim Achronim, someone ended up being killed. So the Rif has basically an anecdotal story that there was sakana that could occur, so then they made this gzeira. The Shulchan Aruch introduces the halachos of Mayim Achronim in Siman 181 by stating plainly that Mayim Achronim are obligatory, based upon the simple meaning of the Gemara in Chulin and the position of the majority of Rishonim. By the end of the Siman, but at the end of the Siman, the Shulchan Aruch also mentions that some do not wash Mayim Achronim today, following the opinion of Tosfos. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Mayim Achronim, chova. Yesh she'ein noagim lito Mayim Achronim. Of course, if we learned the tour and we looked at the Beis Yosef, the yesh that he's quoting is the Tosfos that we just learned. That's how the Tzurba M'Rabanan puts us all together. Now, even who follows the minig of not doing Mayim Achronim, Adam Shu Istanis, V'rogel Yitol Yadav Akrasuda, someone who's finicky and is used to washing his hands after his Suda, Lididei Abu Yadayim Muzomos, and because he feels his hands are filthy, he should wash his hands. So if he's very, easily disgusted, he should have a practice of washing Mayim Achronim. Interesting, the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah, writes that the practice in Ashkenaz follows the lenient opinion. However, the Mishnah Berurah rules that one should wash Mayim Achronim nowadays for two reasons. There may be other types of salt found today that are similar to melech stomies. Even if we accept the second opinion of Shulchan Aruch, some Achronim write that there are Kabbalistic reasons for fulfilling it. Says the Mishnah Rafach Shein Motzui Melech Stomies Beinenu, even though we don't have this sodomite salt, Yesh Lochush LeMelech Acher Shetiva Kamosa. We have to worry about other commercially made salt that might have a similar tendency. V'das hagra, the biuro, in the biur hagra, the tzarech litol ba gam hayidna. The gra advocated Mayim Achronim. The tam melech stoimitz v'yadayim uzomos kamata shayich, he said, one reason, that there's still a problem with the salt. And v'chein kotzav Amogen Avram b'shem hamikubolim the chol adam yizar b'mayim achronim, that it's a Kabbalistic practice. V'chein hichmer HaMarshal, right? The Chachma Shlomo, Rav Shlomo Luria, he's buried in Lublin. I was at his kever. He's buried in the same cemetery as the Chozim in Lublin. The Yam Shel Shlomo, So you have very important achronim that the Mishnah Berurah is telling us that we should be careful today, even b'mayim achronim. Many contemporary poskim, including the Yalkut Yosef or Mordechai Eliyahu rule, that one should be stringent to fulfill mayim achronim even today, especially due to the mystical and Kabbalistic reasons. Nevertheless, Rav Eliezer Melamed, the Pninei Halacha, writes that there is basis for the many individuals who are lenient not to wash, since there are ample grounds for arguing that the halachic reason no longer apply, and one is not obligated to follow Kabbalistic reasons. Even though he says, it seems that the majority of the poskim say to do it, Rabim noyagim lahakel, many have the practice to be lenient. Ubeineim tamei chachamim v'noshim tzidkanios. V'zos mishum shedin mayim achronim b'divrei chachamim. V'aklalu sheb'machlokas b'divrei chachamim halacha k'divrei amekel. It's rabbinic law, and if there's a machlokas, you can always be lenient. Omnam mishi yadin mezomos. If his hands are dirty, he's going to wash it. He should do it before Birchas Hamazon.
Ernie, I must have missed it. You mentioned why then do you do it on Shabbos? Why is it a minhag that we carry on?
No, but that's what I'm saying. It's a minhag. It's not related to Shabbos. It's related to anytime you're going to bench. Anytime you ate bread. It's not related to Shabbos. You should do mayim achronim. If you do mayim achronim on Shabbos, you should do it during the week as well. And if you don't do it, you don't have to do it on Shabbos either. I'm just saying, you see people that have the minhag, on Shabbos they're makpid to do mayim, but there's no basis for that. The basis really is if you want to follow the Kabbalistic reasons and follow the Mishnah Berurah and those achronim, then you should be nizer in mayim achronim. I do see people who are very careful, like Yaakov Goldfinger, your uncle. He's very nizer in the Mishnah Berurah. He always does mayim achronim. Okay. What about women? So even before we learn one line, since the reason was given as a sakana, as a medical reason, there would be no reason to exempt women. It would be certainly women would be obligated as well as men. For example, there's a famous halacha that we follow that the Shulchan Aruch says is mishum sakana. Does anybody know what I'm thinking of?
Fish.
Right, fish and meat. That we don't mix fish and meat. There it says clearly we don't do it because of sakana. Now we don't understand the sakana, but we don't do it. We don't do it. We don't mix fish and meat. There's no din there. It's only by men and not by women. If something is dangerous and there's halacha to protect, it's not going to be gender specific. So we would expect, as we learn through this now, that that's going to be the halacha. Let's see. Even if we accept the stringent position requiring a person to watch mayim achronim, must women also do so? The concern for melech zdomis or holiness should presumably be relevant to women as well, though many women are not accustomed to washing mayim achronim. Indeed, Rav Yisrael Yaakov Fuchs writes in Halichot Bat Yisrael that women are halachically obligated to wash mayim achronim. And the Yalkut Yosef also writes that women should do so. I've seen in many households, that mayim achronim thing gets passed along the table, and they pass it man to man, and they skip over the women. It's correct. I mean, is everybody agreeing to what I've seen myself?
Right,
We see.
But it is not correct.
because we all learned this from the 50s and 60s, 70s.
Yeah, but on what basis would you have been learned not to do it?
Who the heck knows?
Exactly.
Hey, wait a minute.
Halichos Bas Yisrael says Natil Sedai Ma'am Achronim Chiyuv Ishval Enoshim Kanosh. V'chein Omer Li Hagoyin Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and that's what Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach told him in an in-depth halachic article. Rav Dr. Ari Zivatovsky, he's the Indiana Jones. He and his partner, the other dentist, there are two dentists, Zivatovsky and what's the other guy's name?
The other.
He's the two Aris. He's also named Ari. They go all over the place and find unusual things. Also argue strongly that my Achronim is no less applicable to women. In light of the opinions cited, many people are careful to observe the practice of my Achronim. Yet even among those who are scrupulous about washing, there's a general laxity regarding women washing. Since all the reasons given for this obligation are equally applicable to men and women, the negligence is inexplicable. Many significant authorities, Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, Rav Shlomo Chaim HaKohen Aviner, the Mor Tzia, Rav Ovadia Yosef, insist that the obligation to wash is obvious. Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Fuchs, in Halichos Bas Yisrael, records that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach personally told them that there's no basis for women not to wash. And in a place where men wash, women must wash as well. Rav Moshe Sternbuch records that the Gra also held that women are obligated to wash. I have found only one justification for women not washing. According to Rav Vosner, my Achronim is a stringency, since there's no Melach Stomis these days. This stringency, he claims, is one which women never adopted. Okay. So as Rav Zitovsky notes, Rav Shmuel Rosner writes that perhaps many women do not wash my Achronim, since today it may well be merely a stringency in which they never accepted it upon themselves. Says the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner, he says, from the basic law, there would be no difference. Sof Simin Kuf Pei Aleph. The Gam Bizman is a Shaykh Div Mai Machronim, who say that even today you need to do it. So V'aminik Shein Anoshim Noitlis Kol Kach, Hu Al Pi HaShulchan Aruch Sham, the Bizman is a Lo Shaykh Kla Mai Machronim, V'rak Machmim Latzman, that there is a tzad to say that today it's not needed, and it's just a stringency. And the women never accepted this stringency. V'noshim Lo Kiblu Alei. Rav Malamed in Pnei Halacha writes similarly that if those who wash today do so due to the Kabbalistic reasons, one can explain that women are often not particular about Kabbalistic practices. L'maisa nira, shal pi hadin reshai kolodim lahakel bazeh, shnei nimukim ikariyim lekach sha'ikr kemekilim echad hu suffik k'divrei, since it's rabbinic and it's a suffix, it could be mekel. V'av shemachmir merubi mikol makom svara samakilim chazok. It's a strong svara. The second reason, kacha minig arevach uvda shebemeshach doris rabim rov anashim kama yires, the women, even the frum ones, lo noagu lito mai machroni, that was not their meaning to do it. V'yesh lemina koach gadol kiyotz bezeh koza b'shevet HaLevi shnetis mai machronim kayom lichumra the nashim lo kiblu zos aleim, they didn't accept it upon themselves. And the Piskei Tshuvas kosav shenoagu lachmir litul mai machron al pi HaKabbalah v'nashim einan makpidos b'minagei Kabbalah, that women don't follow stringency applications from the Kabbalah. So that's where we are today.
And from a practical point of view, when people pass around a cup with Mayim Achronim, nobody's washing. You're putting a few drops in your hand. That's not really washing off anything. So it obviously has to be a minute Kabbalah. That's all.
So page 72, we will talk about the proper procedure for Mayim Achronim and how to do it. Do we do it properly? How do we do it properly? That's what we're going to learn.
Yeah, Ernie.
Yes, Harold.
For magnesium chloride, I looked up the packing slip. When you order it from a chemical warehouse,
Yes.
it says health hazard data. Magnesium chloride is slightly toxic. It is a skin, eye, and respiratory tract irritant. It can cause burns after prolonged contact. Small amounts of moisture increase the corrosive effect.
There you
So
go.
you think that if you wash your hands with, like the way we wash my macaroni with a small amount, you would increase the corrosive effect. So you
Yeah.
really have to wash your hands
Yeah.
thoroughly.
Yeah.
It says you have to wear gloves when you handle it.
Yeah, but that's it when you that's probably when you're buying the chemical magnesium chloride. But it could be that in salt, there's just small quantities of it.
But I'm thinking maybe the salt that's at the Dead Sea is magnesium chloride, not
All
not
of it,
sodium chloride.
not sodium chloride.
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe that's what they're inferring.
Mhm. Okay. So where do we wash Mayim Achronim? According to the majority opinion, which requires a person to wash Mayim Achronim today, we must now clarify some of the other details of the mitzvah, beginning with where should you wash Mayim Achronim? The Gemara addresses this question in Masechta Chulin, Kufei Amidal, Gufa, Mayim Rishonim V'Achronim Chova. And then, so the initial Tzis Yadayim and the Tzis Yadayim right before benching, those are obligatory. And Tzoim, these are middle waters. I guess water brought to you in the middle of the meal is Rishus. You may do that. Rishonim notin bein b'kli bein al gabi karka. Nitis Yadayim you can wash by spilling the water into a vessel or onto the ground. Achroinim ein noitin el b'kli. My achronim you have to use a kli. And meaning the wastewater has to end up in a kli. Not that you have to use a kli. I mean, we'll see. You have to use a kli as well to pour the water on your hand, but they're specifically referring to the water that falls off your hand. So natilas yadayim can go on the ground or into another kli. Like sometimes you see at a wedding, they have a big basin to put wash. Or let's say you're out camping, you could do it as a stayim on the ground. But if you're going to do Mayim Achronim, you need a kli to do Mayim Achronim in. That's why you have that little kli that goes around, so that when you wash your hands, the water goes into the kli. Okay? The Amri law, however, some say ain't not l'nagabikar. In fact, some say you may not dump it on the ground. Ikbinayu kinsa. The practical difference regarding this, because they had like these thin wooden slivers on the ground. According to the first thing that we learned, that you have to pour the Mayim Achronim into a kli, so you can't use those wooden chips. But according to the second version, you can't pour it directly on the ground, but you could use the wooden chips as the intermediate. So according to the first version, one must wash Mayim Achronim into a vessel. While according to the second version, you can't wash into the ground, but you may wash onto wooden slivers on the ground. Rashi further clarifies what is meant by wood slivers and why Mayim Achronim may not be poured directly on the ground, because the water contains ruach ra, a foul spirit. We learn that about when we wake up in the morning and we do Netilas Yadayim right after we wake up. That's the ruach ra that we get off of our hands. And Rashi explains, in no saying, shvai eitzim v'kismin tachteim, if you sprinkle on the ground wooden chips, the mandama kli Hachalav kli. According to the one who says you got to dump the water in a kli, it wouldn't be good. But Lamandar Einot Gabi Karpa Shapi, it would be good because you're not dumping the water directly on the ground, you're putting it on the wooden chips. That whatever this spirit is, this bad spirit, when it's on the ground, then it's bad. The tour is in accordance with the second version of the Gemara, rules that it's permissible to pour mayim achronim upon wood slivers, and the prohibition is only to pouring it directly on the ground. Right? There's a ruach ra there. If you like sawdust, like in the old butcher shops, you walk in, they had sawdust or wooden chips, that would be okay. The Rambam rules in accordance with the first opinion of the Gemara, such that one must pour the water from mayim achronim into a vessel. Mayim rishonim nitolim ben al gabi kli ben gabi karka. Achronim en nitolim el gabi kli. The Shulchan Aruch rules that lechatchila one should follow the opinion of the Rambam, but b'yevid one may rely upon the opinion of the Tur. Mayim achronim ein noitlim al gabi karka el b'kli. They ruach rosh hashanah. The main lo kli noit al gabi eitzim dakim v'chiyotz b'hem. If you're out on a campsite, don't pour mayim achronim directly on the ground. Make sure you find some wooden branches or chips, something like that, and make sure you wash it on that.
Is it because that would be absorbent, like if you use leaves or grass, it would roll off onto the ground?
Yeah, you don't want it to do it directly on the ground because somehow that ruach ra is bad. And if you put it on the wood, it'll be absorbed by the wood and not go on the ground. The Mishnah Berurah writes that one may pour the water onto the ground in a place where no one will walk on the water. So, for example, you're in a park, right? You could wash your hands. There's an area where people don't walk. Like bushes behind a in a bush where people aren't walking there. That's where you could wash mayim achronim. By the way, I believe this probably also pertains, and I'm sure we'll learn it, to the halachas at a cemetery. That when you wash your hands, when you walk out of the cemetery, also, you probably don't want to dump it in a place where people are going to walk. You want to wash in a place where people don't walk because there's probably a ruach ra there as well. It's one of the reasons why we do netilas yadayim then. The Mishnah Berurah, Ela b'kli, v'lo yischav yada b'tocha kli l'rochtzam. You don't stick your hands into the vessel. Ela yishpoch hamayim al yadav sheyered l'tocha kli. So that's how we do. You pour it on your hand, and it runs into the kli. Mibnei ruach ra, v'yesh chshas sakana la'oiver aleihem. Right? If somebody would walk over that, there's a sakana. You can pour it on the ground if it's a place where people don't walk. Like underneath your table, where people don't walk. People would make mayim achronim under the table, directly on the ground. Or let's say you're on a picnic table at a park. Nobody walks there. Even though you sometimes move the table and you sweep there, it's going to dry up. In light of these sources, it is permitted to wash mayim achronim. Is it permitted to dump the mayim achronim into the sink? Although the sink is not technically part of the ground, it's still a fixed part of the house, which is treated as being halachically attached to the ground. Nevertheless, Rav Avadia Yosef in Abiyah Yomer says that it's permitted to wash mayim achronim in the sink because the water goes down the drain and into the sewer, which is not a place where people walk. Da de lo nafkamina ledina Benidin didan avi bekli or bekarka. There's no difference. Yan shatam shetzorach litol l'toch kli v'lo gal bekarka b'shum shuach ra shola because of the ruach ra. By then it is the daim mavir ruach ra me'yadayim v'nidfka b'mayim ma'im. The ruach ra is transferred from our hands to the water. U'shnot al gal bekarka nidbach ruach ra bekarka. Now you've dumped the ruach ra on the ground. U'sho'avim alav bnei adam nizakin. When people pass by, they're damaged. Lachein tzarech al gabi kli dafka. Or people where they don't walk there. So today, he says we can be lenient. Today, when we dump water in a sink, it goes through pipes to the sewer. Nobody who goes there. You can wash into there. The Piskei Teshuvos agrees that one may wash mayim achronim into the sink, but he cautions that no dishes should be present at that time, so that the ruach ra does not rest upon them. I mean, most of us have an Netilas Yadayim sink. Most people don't put any kalim there. The only kli you might put there is your washing kli. So you would probably want to keep that out of there. You can wash in a sink. Eating kalim. Because people do wash their hands like this on sinks, on kalim, dishes. But you should wash it away with the faucet. Or don't put eating dishes in there until it dries up. Due to the element of ruach ra present within the water used for mayim achronim, the poskim also discuss whether one must remove it from the table while reciting Birchas Hamazon. Rav Ben Sina B'Shul writes that one may leave it on the table because in his opinion, the ruach ra is only present when the water is poured onto the ground outside. You can bench with right in front of the mayim achronim. Mashakasav Moran, that Shulchan Aruch wrote. That's only if you dumped it on the ground. Or on the floor, or in a kli. There's no ruach ra. Umashehevi, Rav Chaim Palagi, B'Shem Agon, right? The Kaf HaChaim brings in the name of Rav Chaim Palagi, Shetov Lasire Me'al Ponav Beis Abracha. He was one who said you should remove it at the time of benching. Eino mitam ruach ra, el mishum mius. It was because it was disgusting. He was an istinus, and he didn't want dirty water in front of him. Other poskim assume that the ruach ra is still present in the water used for mayim achronim. Accordingly, they assume that it is inappropriate to recite a bracha in the presence of the ruach ra that rests on the water. The Shari Tshuva mentions this. Ayin Baher Heitev, because of Birkei Yosef, Sheminig HaCharedim, El Dvar Hashem Shel Likros Levarich Neged HaMayim Shenotlu Behem. You're not going to bench in front of the mayim achronim. Even the Netilas Yadayim that you use in the morning. Rav Chaim Abulafia. Rav Wosner writes that ideally one should remove the mayim achronim water before Birchas Hamazon, but its presence does not invalidate or prevent the recital of Birchas Hamazon. Lohirit sakinim bevesa, removing knives. There was a practice of removing the knives that's recorded by Shulchan Aruch. Two reasons are given. The table is compared to the altar in the Beis HaMikdash, which lengthens a person's days, and iron shortens a person's days when used as a sword. There was once an incident when someone was so distraught when mentioned in Midrash Birchas Amos that he stabbed himself. So there's a minute to remove the knives. It doesn't invalidate. The Sefer Orchos Rabbeinu mentions that the Stipler Gaon had a different practice of covering the water. And that's why you see the minig, that people put a plate or something over it, or you buy something with a kli that you wash in covers the receptacle part. So the kli itself is the cover. You want to get me the thing?
Yeah. Most people have that.
The Sudas Hasheva Brachas shall nechtat Moiri the Stipler Raisi Shemoy Radi Machasas Mayim Achronim Shadok Tzalachas Im Mapit Niyar Lifnei. He covered. Yeah, I have this.
Most people.
Right. You have a kos with the water, and then you wash it here and you cover it with the kos. I'm sure that's not news to anybody. What type of vessel should be used for my machronim? The Piskei Teshuvah writes that it's customary to use a simple vessel rather than a fancy one. Noagu sheyeh kli pashut, ki hamayim shenichnosim lekli hem chelek hasitra achra. The water has a foul spirit. Don't ever use it to eat or drink anything. If you did it into a regular dish, just wash it well. Okay, we'll stop here. And we'll deal with what Bernie asked about how much of the hand must you wash and all of that. And next week we will learn Zimun, Hilchos Zimun, and then of course Hilchos Birchas Amos. Very relevant halachas coming up. Any questions, comments, Ha'arot?
Very good, Ernie. Thank you.
Okay.
Very informative.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Navi Shir this week 8:30, Motzei Shabbos 8:30,
Right.
and next week the Tzurba Shir.
I'm not going to be here.
Well, why do we make a bracha to that? If it's so important, was there such a thing as a bracha on my machronim?
No, because remember it's not a mitzvah; it's a chova.
You said, Ernie, you have to be careful that there shouldn't be any dishes in the sink. Okay, and then
If
on
you're
the
going to
other
wash,
hand,
if you're going to wash my machronim in the sink,
or I thought you were referring to spilling out the ma'achronim.
or spilling out the my
Right.
machronim. Yes.
But yet on the other hand, right before we talked about the kli that covers the water, we were saying, oh, but most, many of the people said that you could leave it on the table, but
Without cover,
without
No,
the cover.
then
But
we
I
brought-
don't understand why.
We brought somebody who said you could leave it, but then we brought multiple people that said you should cover it or take it off the table. When you have that thing that I showed, the kli that covers, so
Right,
you don't
no,
have to
but
take it
that
off-
works.
you don't have to
But I
take it
don't
off the
understand
table.
how you can reconcile that it is water that's tame or whatever, or ruach, right? Bad ruach. But so there, how can you have anyone to say to leave it on the table?
Because he said, let's see. The Orlet Sion, the Ben Sion Abba Shol said it's permissible to recite the bracha up to the Ma'achronim, because he claimed there's only ruach ra when you dump that water on the ground. When it's in a kli or even on the floor, there's no ruach ra. That's what his opinion is.
Oh, I understand.
But others held that there's ruach ra there even when it's in a kli. That's the machlokas. And that's why you have to cover it or remove it. And yes, like Sai said, you have to be careful where you dump it. You shouldn't dump it where the dishes are.
Most people do.
So we have to be careful. So it should be dumped, put it in the Tisadayim sink.
How are your children, Ernie, in Israel?
They're okay. I mean, they've spent time in the bunker rooms because they've been sirens. There hasn't been any
Yeah, but
missiles, but it's early. It's early, I think, in this whole thing. Very early.
Well, it's early. If they get started, they'll get rid of the missiles. I mean,
No, because I
The-
think
the-
the north, they're expecting a big barrage from the north once they go in.
oh, from the north, yeah. Okay. I have my
That's why I think America has shipped a lot of more Iron Dome, a lot more, because Israel's already used a lot up.
Mhm.
And it could be that the aircraft carrier group,
Oh, it's carrying
that
weapons.
group,
Yeah.
they have ships, I think, that have it. I think that's why because it's a whole carrier group. There's 100 ships around an aircraft carrier.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. You can see it from
So
CNN.
they may
that.
have ships that no, but to have weaponry to shoot missiles down.
So with do you think the Americans will shoot from the ships, or they'll give
Maybe.
it to Israel?
gonna do it.
They said that they will. They said that if a third party comes in, that they'll get involved. Probably.
They warned
If Hezbollah comes in,
they
they said they'll
warned
get involved.
Lebanon and Iran directly. And then there's Syria. There was some mortar shells from Syria that came. But that could be rogue elements. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Taliban there, there's ISIS there. I think there's very small groups there, but who knows? Maybe Hezbollah fighters have moved over to Syria. By the way, a lot of the soldiers have been sent north. Like Shoshana lives in Renana. A lot of the soldiers that are called up have been sent north. Not everybody's been sent south. They're already preparing for the north. I think they want to clean up this whole mess in one shot now. Hezbollah, Hamas, they want to take care. They don't want this anymore. They want to clean up. But it may come at a big cost.
Yeah.
But it looks like the United States is giving Israel a free hand. And maybe now they want to take that opportunity. Anyways, we should daven for them.
Amen.
Amen.
Learn
Amen.
from them.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Let's go.
Have a good one, everybody.
You too.
Good night.
Okay, now I'll change it. That's the map.
Okay, guys. Oh. What you doing? What you doing? Don't. No, I told that I thought YY trick. Remember the trick I told you? Should I teach you the same trick? Okay, I just want to teach you a trick. What's the trick, man? What's the trick, YY? Can you want to tell him or should I tell him? You want to teach him the trick? Should I teach you all the trick? Okay, here's the trick. The trick is that I'm not tickling you, and say to yourself, I'm not being tickled. You got to say to yourself, I'm not being tickled. Tell yourself that. And that's it. Say, I'm not being tickled. You got to say that. Say to yourself, Benny, why the same thing? Did I show you the trick? Does it work? I'm not tickling you. I'm not, look and see this. He holds himself. I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. I'm saying that. I'm not tickling you. Say to yourself, I'm not tickling you. You see, he controls him. That's how you do it. Try to do it to me.
Are you ticklish though?
Huh?
Are you ticklish?
Try to tickle me.
You're pretending, Dana.
See, you control yourself.
You're pretending. Are you really ticklish?
Control yourself. Oh, see, control yourself.
Ow, that hurts.
No, it doesn't hurt. See, should I do it to YY now? Should I do it to you, YY? We have a game here. I taught him a good game. He knows now. Okay, YY. I'm not tickling you. See, I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. See? Try to you. Can you do it? Can you do it?
Try.
Okay, say to yourself, I'm not tickling you. Take you, I'm not tickling you. Say it yourself. Say it. Say it.
Tickling me.
See, you're not tickling. See? See, you're not tickling. Huh?
You're not tickling
See? You're not tickling me. I'm not tickling you. See?
me.
See? Yeah?
You're not tickling me.
I'm not tickling you. See? So that's it. How about you? Can I try to you?
I tried to tickle
Huh?
me.
Come on. You're not tickling me. You're not tickling me. I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. I'm not tickling you. You gotta say it. You gotta say it. I'm not tickling you. See, you probably he won already. He won, yeah, but you won the first, and he won the second, and Shmuel Tobias. You're not tickling me.
You're not tickling me.
You're not tickling me. You're not tickling me. See, he won also. Oh my goodness. Yeah. One second. 1 second.